Howdy, y'all. This is Kurtis Sunset, and on today's episode, we are going to talk about costuming and the roles that we play in life. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to another Weathering Rainbows interview. This is Kurtis Sunset, and I have the special guest, Cody Garmon, today with us. Cody, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been a resident here since 2014. I moved here from Glasgow, Kentucky, where I was born and raised. I started my journey here as a makeup artist. And I went on from there to begin a career in law enforcement, and that's what I do now.
Awesome. What was it like to grow up in Glasgow?
Everybody is pretty much the same, and I think that's the case with a lot of rural areas. You just get people who fall into these traditions of doing the same things and enjoying the same things. Everybody works at the same places, and I didn't like that. I felt like I had to be sheltered my entire life and just live in a bubble and not really share who I was. And so when I was in college for my first year, I decided to move here to experience different cultures and different people.
Was there any sort of like LGBTQ acceptance or bars in Glasgow's area, anything like that?
Nothing like that.
So completely sheltered from
I was
culture.
The gay community.
Yeah. So were you out in Glasgow, or did you wait until you moved?
I didn't officially come out as gay until my first year of college. But even then, it was very short-lived in Glasgow. In high school, I kind of shared with my close friends, which ended up biting me in the ass because I got bullied by them, and so it was something I was very private about.
It's understandable. So you did you go to U of L, or
No.
What college did you go to?
The first college I went to was Western Kentucky University.
Okay. What was campus like for LGBTQ kids over in that area?
I didn't live on campus. I was in foster care from the time I was 14 until I aged out at the age of 18. So I was a part of a recommitment program where fostered youth can recommit their rights to the state, and the state in return gives you housing and pays for your schooling. So I lived in an apartment, and Glasgow has a Western campus there. So I never experienced campus life because I'm a college student now, but I do online school.
Right. What led you down the path to wanting to be a police officer?
As a kid that spent a significant amount of time in foster care, I was able to see how there are a lot of children who need good role models in their life. Yeah. And a lot of kids who need help and just don't have a voice. And being a kid that grew up with a father who struggled with drug addiction and was in an abusive environment, I just felt very drawn to the profession to try to use my experience in life to help other people.
Right. And so you started your career at Louisville Metro,
Mm-hmm.
and now you work as a sheriff's office in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little about the past 4 years. What have you enjoyed about the job? What have you disliked? That sort of thing.
Sure. So I began my career here in Louisville in August of 2018. I was extremely private about my sexuality. during the academy because I didn't want to be treated differently just because of who I was. But, I mean, it's not like I hid myself. I still feel like there were some incidents where they did treat me differently, and they were harder on me just because they wanted to try to break me. But that's really what the academy is about.
Were there anybody that was out at the academy whenever you were there?
No, and I wasn't aware of any gay officers at the time that worked within the department, but I knew that there was a sheriff's officer that had his leg broken. So I knew that there was potentially some kind of different treatment there. Okay. And so I just wanted to kind of shelter myself from that. I didn't want to be labeled as the gay cop right out the bat. So I completed my academy very much under the radar. I really didn't begin to become who I was personally and really envelop my professional life with my personal life until I was out of the academy. And for a while, it was really good. I've used my position to develop relationships with the gay community. I firmly believe that a department should reflect the community that it serves.
Definitely.
And so I've advocated for the gay community and participated in LGBTQ promoted events through the department. Even before I became an officer, I volunteered a lot of my time for pride festivals and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really been a great platform for me. But unfortunately, I feel like when I began to really step into the light of who I really was, I began to get treated differently. Yeah. And that was very hard for me to try to focus on my career and deal with personal aspects of my life that I was dealing with at the time.
What kind of ways do you feel like you were treated differently than before?
I mean, when you look at things that were done to me and you look at a white heterosexual female, for example, if we do the same thing, I get the heavier punishment and she gets a conversation. Okay. That doesn't add up to me. And there's no explanation other than we treated him differently. I mean, it's black and white. I just felt like I became a target and they would zone in on me every little thing that I would do. It was a big ordeal.
Now, you were there, obviously, during some of the most tension times we've had for Louisville Metro. Obviously, Breonna Taylor's happened during that time period. So there was all the Black Lives Matter movement right here in Louisville. And so obviously there is some injustice that we are continuing to work on at Louisville. What was that experience like being an officer, being LGBTQ, and going through that movement during that time period?
Sure. First of all, we're still going through that movement. We're going to be going through that movement for years to come. Yes. And I'm enlightened to be on the forefront of that. I have a very unique position, being a minority myself. I don't know what it's like to be a black man, but I do know what it's like to be treated differently because of who I am. Correct. And being in a hyper-masculine dominated field, it's been very challenging for me to overcome these implicit bias that people have within my department, within the community. So I just try to use my position to, again, have an understanding of what people are going through. And at the end of the day, a gay man is going to feel more comfortable talking to me about a domestic violence situation than they are some heterosexual white male.
Absolutely.
That's a fact. Yeah. I mean, you can't debunk that. And not only that, but when we look at race, like I said, I have an understanding of what these people have dealt with. I've been a victim of oppression. Right. And I understand that while I'm not in their same shoes, it happens, and we have to hold ourselves accountable. police have made mistakes, and we have to do a better job moving forward.
Right. One of the things, obviously Black Lives Matter movement with Breonna Taylor, what happened there was a tragedy. But I will say that in terms of minorities, other minorities are facing oppression. And I think one of the things I've noticed about Louisville is whenever I was going to undergrad here, the cops would also hang out in highly gay-dominated areas. Your nightclubs, your stuff like that, and they kind of circle those a lot more than they would, say, the high ends of Louisville.
The places that they frequent.
Right. And I can say from my own experience, there's been times whenever I've specifically been targeted just because I was wearing a tighter pair of pants, or, walking down at 3 a.m. because you're coming home, from the bar. And it's, I think that does happen more frequently. Is there anything that you noticed while you were on the force to where your peers, your coworkers, targeted those specific individuals worse than other areas?
Sure. Thankfully, I can't say that I have been witness to officers singling out people based off of the color of their skin or their sexuality in the community. But I have had individuals who refuse to work with me.
Wow.
Simply because I like men. Individuals who make inappropriate comments suggesting that I'm nasty or I have a disease.
Wow.
And those are things that I would bring attention to and would go absolutely unnoticed. That's unacceptable.
Right. If they believe that, then how are they going to help other LGBTQ individuals out there that they automatically have that assumption for?
Exactly.
Yeah. I know you've now gone over to Indiana and are working there. Do you see a difference between the two police forces that you worked for?
There is definitely a difference between Indiana and Kentucky as far as law enforcement across the board goes. And I'll speak more specifically to Louisville because it is more progressive, and you have people who are on home incarceration who've murdered people. That's problematic. We work very hard to put these people in custody so that they can't hurt other people, and then our judicial system lets them right back out. And then they're, oh my God, they killed someone else. Yeah, that's what murderers do.
I was a clerk for the courts down in Louisville, and one of my first experiences was whenever I first got the position, the previous clerk had ROR'd somebody who had like $1 million bond for murder, and just like let them out on the streets, for free. So, big mistake, but it does happen.
Oh yeah. And sometimes it's not a mistake. If you look at the officers that got shot during the Breonna Taylor riots, that man was charged with attempted murder of a police officer, 2 counts, and those have been dropped to an assault, and he walks the streets every day. So the judicial system has its own issues it needs to work through, and we have to elect people who are going to hold people accountable for their decisions and not just hold the police accountable for their wrongdoing too. Right. You can't create a safe community just being one-sided. And so that's accountability across the board. As far as Indiana goes, I spoke to a commander recently, and he's like, we still operate under color of law over here. What took place in this city a year ago wouldn't have happened in a lot of cities in Indiana because they have control and they maintain control. Unfortunately, the Breonna Taylor riots were kind of overhauled, and people took advantage of that platform to commit crimes.
Right.
And we should have never allowed that to happen.
And that is going to happen in any sort of riot or situation like that. You're going to have people that are out there on the front lines that are truly meaningful about it, and then you're going to have those that take advantage of any situation out there. So I know that you're a cop, but you're also a makeup artist. Tell us a little bit about how you got started into that.
So, a little story. When I was in college for my first year, this is prior to moving to Louisville, I met a guy who was in the same high school as me, who was openly gay. And we kind of clicked and became friends. I hadn't came out yet, but he kind of showed me around the gay community a little bit. And he's like, have you ever been to play? And I'm like, what's that? Right. What is that? I don't know anything about that. And he's like, they do drag shows. I'm like drag racing, like cars?
Yeah.
Like, that's all I know that drag is.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, like drag queens. And I'm like, hold on, I got to Google this because I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
That's great.
And so I experienced Play Nashville for the first time. And that was, I would say, probably 2013 or so. And I was just in awe and fascinated by the art form that is drag. Aurora Sexton was like my idol back then. I adored her. I thought she was so creative, and I thought she was just a very sweet person. And I don't know, I kind of developed my passion for makeup from there, and I explored. And I don't know if you've ever done drag, Kurtis, but you start in a rough place, You don't start out being fabulous, okay? But over the years, I really have perfected my talent in makeup, and I became very well known for just being beautiful. That was kind of my cup of tea. So I just took that passion and decided to apply it in my professional life, and I pursued a career in makeup.
Yeah. What's your call to the stage?
Ava Johnson.
Ava Johnson. All right. So you got started in drag, and you said you've done that for about 4 years as well.
No, well, I worked at Play for about 4 years.
Okay. But you were on their weekly cast, right?
Yes. I think I started out I know I did Ladies Night, which is on Thursdays, and then I also did Wednesday nights. I participated in some of their pageants and competitions they did. I was actually Miss Play Newcomer in 2017, 18.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Where do you see that going in the future?
I love performing, and since I became an officer, it's something I kind of had to put on the back burner, which is okay, but it's still something that I love to do. And it's kind of therapeutic for me because I've spent so much time in my life pretending to be someone that I wasn't. And so when you put on that makeup and the costume and you get on stage, you can be anything that you want to be. And it's so freeing just to get up there. And if you're sad, get up there and cry. Just let it out. It's a safe space to just emote and be who you want to be in that moment.
That's really interesting. I would not have used it as an emotional tool, but I guess it's very therapeutic.
I've done it many times. I've gotten on stage and did a sad song and cried and looked out in the audience, and there are people crying with me because they feel what I feel, and that to me makes it worth it. Yeah,
that's the relation that drag queens can have over their audience. You know, they can make them feel those things. You said you had to put it on hold. What does that mean in terms of, did you not perform at all, or was it just kept secret?
I did. It was more so a personal choice. It wasn't like I was pressured into doing it. I've had officers that I've worked with come to my shows and support me, and I'm very thankful for those people. You know, like I said, I never witnessed any kind of discriminatory behavior towards the community during my time, but I have developed great relationships with people, and I have come to know that there are a lot of great people who wear a badge each and every day that will protect anyone and everyone, regardless of their religion, the color of their skin, or the person that they lay with in the bed at night.
Right.
So, I've had an overwhelming amount of support, and I really don't pay attention to the people who disagree. It's not really important to me.
So were you ever, did it ever become an issue that you did drag prior to becoming an officer? Did that ever come up in interviews or anything that they might have discovered?
No, I was very private. I deleted all my accounts.
See, I think a lot of times LGBTQ people in general, even if we're not forced to make certain decisions, we do because we're afraid of what it might cause.
Absolutely.
What do you think it may have caused if you did live that openness? And I mean, that's obviously something you want to do because you enjoy it. It's therapeutic for you. No different than, me reading. It's something that you just enjoy. Mm-hmm. So how do you balance that?
To be honest, I don't think I would be sitting here with 4.5 years of service right now if I had been open about that.
Do you think it would have been more community members that would have had a problem, or more your internal organization?
The department. Policing is political.
Right.
And your past and your behaviors are a reflection of that agency. Mm-hmm. Not that there is anything wrong with drag.
Right.
But drag gets a negative rap. It's associated with drinking and drugs. It's sexualized. And so the department could easily articulate how that isn't a good outlook for them. Right. So I do feel that I wouldn't be given the opportunity that I have now if I had been open about it.
I think that's something our community really needs to understand. If your police officers are going to be a reflection of your community, mm-hmm. then it should be okay for an officer to go on a weekend that he's not working and perform drag to show that the drag and LGBTQ facets, like in every aspect of life. It's in every profession. It's in everything. But to be forced to hide those things, I think, is why we see situations like we do, where people become anti-police. They don't see them as one within the community. So I think it does take courage from people like you to be able to do both of those things and show people that. What advice would you give for an LGBTQ person that wanted to become a police officer, going through what you've already gone through?
I would say, first and foremost, do your research. I have been exploring options as far as my career path recently. And the first thing I do is look and see, okay, what is the political background of this community? How do they support gay people? If that city doesn't support gay rights, or, it doesn't have anti-discriminatory laws, I'm not interested. Because while there may be a need for me there, I'm wasting my time if I try to get on somewhere and I have to pretend to be someone that I'm not the entire time that I'm there.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the first thing that someone should do, is really do their research and invest their time into a community that's going to welcome them. Because getting hired as an officer takes time. It's a 6-month process. Mm-hmm. And then once you get hired on, you have to go through a 6-month academy. So you're looking at a year and a half before you ever put on a badge and work the street. Second of all, use your platform. If you're given a voice, use it. We're never going to fix the problem if we sit down and shut up.
Right.
So take what you've got and run with it. It's not going to impress everybody, but you're not there to impress everybody. You're there to impress the ones who have had to sit back and be quiet the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think a lot of the issues often get resolved in the silence of paperwork. Mm-hmm. People don't actually know the issues that are going on until it's too late. Mm-hmm. And I do think we see that in our officers. Kind of, there's a good thing and a bad thing, I think, about kind of the camaraderie that officers face.
Absolutely.
And we've discussed that a little bit in the past about how you feel, you've left this force after 4 years, and kind of tell us about the bond that you have with the cops there.
I love those people. And I would literally die for those people. You go into work every day and you have to prepare yourself mentally. This could be it. I could be attacked and I may not walk out of this place. that's something that you have to come to a realization with. And so you become very dependent on the people that you work with because they have to have your back. So, like you said, we previously discussed, it's not something that everybody gets to experience, that type of relationship. You really become family. And so for me, like, trying to move forward in the investigation with the discriminatory behaviors that went towards me, getting people to talk is difficult because there's this brotherhood. I'm going to protect this person and they're going to protect me. And not only that, but a lot of people have dirt on other people. So if you throw them under the bus, they can throw you under the bus, and it makes everybody look bad. That is a problem because we haven't been holding people accountable for their behavior.
Yeah.
You can't do that. And moving forward, if policing is going to improve, it's got to stop.
Yeah, definitely true. Let's talk a little bit more about your upbringing. I know you said you had gone through foster care for, I guess, the 4 years of high school life, or
yeah. So I went to foster care. I want to say 2013. Yeah. And or no, not 2013. I'm sorry. Heck, I don't even remember. Yeah. It was about 4 years.
What was that process like? Were you? I'm assuming you weren't out at that point.
No.
But obviously, foster kids. There's a lot of LGBTQ. I mean, we've had, I think, 3 people this week that had gone through foster care or adoption process. So, what was that process like for you as a kid?
If I had to sum it up into one word, traumatic. We need to reform that system. It's broken. You never know who these kids are living with. My first home, I messed that up. I was going through a lot. I was depressed. I had been abused. Right. I messed that up on my own accord. But my second home, the lady was very, very strict, and she imposed her religion on us, and we were basically used as farmhands.
Wow.
And the state was okay with that.
Yeah, they just wanted to put you somewhere.
She lived in a 2-bedroom house, and there were 5 of us, teen boys, in 1 bedroom. There was no air conditioner. We ate eggs off the farm and drank goat's milk like it was some Little House on the Prairie stuff, okay? Yeah. It sucked. And I eventually developed a voice for myself and started to stand up and say, I'm not going to live like this. I sat and watched that lady feed a 9-year-old child a peanut butter sandwich that she found that he didn't finish like 2 weeks later.
Wow.
And she forced him to eat it. That's unacceptable. So when I started to speak out, I'm labeled as a problem child, whatever. I ended up going to like 4 different high schools in 1 year. I ended up getting placed in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I really enjoyed that home. But I ended up being raped by my foster brother.
Jeez. And
so that was kind of like my first, like, legit gay experience. We've all dibbled and dabbled in it growing up, but that was my first, like, really gay experience.
But it was non-consensual experience.
Yes. And so I ended up having to leave that home because I began to lash out, and my behavior reflected the actions that were imposed against me. But I will say that the last home that I lived in treated me very well, and I still have a relationship with them today. She knew I was different. Her husband was very strict, but he wasn't home a lot. And when he was home, he would make us work, but she would always keep me inside. She took care of me. And there was another home that was in between, and that family they took care of me. They actually had planned to adopt me. So we were in the process of transferring from one private agency to another, and this family was in the process of adopting me. We were very hush-hush about it because it's all about money.
Right.
We are basically a paycheck to a lot of these places. And So it was the day that we were supposed to transition, and the private agency got with the other private agency and requested the information they needed for us. And that private agency that we were with at the time removed us from the home. They picked us up off the school bus, wouldn't even let us go back in the house. So that suspended my adoption process, and I was uprooted and sent somewhere else until they found somewhere else for me to go. And I'm like, I've literally found a family that I am happy with, and you're taking that away from me.
So what was the purpose of them? I get that there was, I guess, two different agencies conflicting, but what was the purpose of them removing you from that home?
So I think there were 3 of us at the time. And you got to think that they get money from the state for us. So if they take us away, they're no longer getting that funding.
Right.
So it all boiled down to money.
Gotcha.
Not the child's well-being, of course. That's not what it's about.
Is there any, within the foster care, is there any way for a foster child to identify as LGBTQ to the state so that they know to put them in a home that's accepting? Yeah,
they ask questions like that. And every foster child goes through counseling, and I'm sure that's something that, if the therapist feels needs something that needs to be addressed, I'm sure they talk about it in counseling, but those are personal conversations that are protected by confidentiality. So it's really up to the child to disclose that. I did not, because I didn't feel comfortable, and I wasn't really in a headspace to do that because I was swallowing a much bigger pill with everything else that was going on in my life. The last thing I could do was really focus on who I was. I had to protect myself and kind of be an adult, even though I was still a child. But yeah, they do ask, how do you identify? And I'm sure now even more so with how, dare I say, normalized being gay has become, that I'm sure they've really developed new ways to identify that.
Yeah. And I believe one of the things that I had seen on foster care is they even asked some of the kids nowadays if they'd be comfortable with having, for instance, 2 fathers or 2 mothers versus the what used to be I'm not even going to call it normal, the traditional type of home, So I think they're at least making a little bit of advances in the LGBTQ realm in that regard. But obviously, this system, it's difficult, but it could use a lot of work.
I'm sure there are still agencies that don't allow same-sex parents. But I, in my last relationship, actually fostered a child with my then partner. So they are out there. Yeah. And it's actually beneficial when you have an LGBTQ plus child to be placed with parents who understand struggles that they're going through at such a developmental time in their life. And they need that support as far as their sexuality goes, because they've got so much other stuff going on in their life at home with their parents, their biological parents. So I think that is a really important thing to offer.
Yeah. And I do know that we do have some organizations in Kentucky that are still refusing, and that was a big ordeal with Governor Beshear. I believe it's Sunrise organization. They're predominantly traditional families. They want to place all their kids with traditional families, which caused them to potentially lose funding, which was
as they should.
And I agree.
If you are able to provide a loving home for a child and you have the means to do it, then you should be allowed to do it.
Right. So you fostered a child.
Yes.
How was that, being a parent?
It was very interesting raising a teenager at the age of 25.
Wow.
That was very interesting. It was something I had to learn how to do. And being an officer at the time, it was even more a challenge because I have the stressors of work, the stressors of my relationship, and then trying to maintain all of that and provide a stable home for a child who has had a disrupted past. But thankfully, I was able to do the best that I could, and I feel I feel good about the home that I provided.
Yeah. Well, thank you for providing that service for that kid. I know any foster kid, they need a home like that. Somebody that's been there, been through it. So I'm appreciative of you taking that step to do that.
Thank you.
We do a segment on here called the Do's and the Don'ts, where we kind of let you give us 3 do's and 3 don'ts for our listeners. Advice, any advice you want to give them. Our listeners are primarily college-age kids or high school-age kids that are from rural areas and going through coming out or a part of the LGBTQ community. It's kind of just your way of giving back. So I'll let you kind of think on those and toss them out as you can come up with them.
Okay. Well, first of all, don't just assume that drag is just about cars. Because it's not. I made that mistake. Culture yourself.
That's where I didn't even ask him about the heap of trouble, because that was the perfect example of a heap of trouble,
Yeah. I guess you don't live in the dark. Just don't be afraid to embrace yourself. You only have one chance to live your life. And I know it's scary, but the sooner that you accept what you are and who you are, the better your life, the quality of your life will improve immediately. Just the weight that comes off of your shoulders, accepting that. And don't think for one second that just because you're feminine or you're gay that you can't work in policing or be a wrestler or do these masculine jobs. It's kind of like oppression with women. Like just because they're a woman doesn't mean they can't do that job. And it's the same way for gay people. Just because you're gay doesn't mean that you can't kick somebody's ass if you have to.
Yep. Yep, there's a lot of them out there that could definitely kick some ass.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Was that 3 and 3? Okay. We do a final segment on the show where we ask a pot of gold question. Basically, it's an opportunity for you to ask me one final question, and then I turn it around and ask you one final question. It can be on any topic, any wild thing you want to throw out. And but remember, the worse you are to me, the worse my question will be back.
Well, I have to go first.
Yes.
I don't know. I have to think. Kurtis, how often do you have to use your makeup to conceal your sins?
All right, called out today. Yeah. There's always a reason why you wear collared shirts sometimes. We had a fun night last night, and every now and then you got to use a little makeup. I'm glad I had a pro on set today to make sure I did the right contour. So I wouldn't say a whole lot. I can think of 2 times that I've had to use concealer already.
This week?
No. 2 times or the concealer's been used. All right. Well, your question then, how many times, you're the first cop I've had on my show, how many times have you done role play with the handcuffs that...
I have only put handcuffs on one person. One. And I don't even talk to them anymore.
We'll take that. So, all right. Well, we thank you for being here, everybody. This was Cody Garmon, also known as Ava Johnson, and hopefully we'll get to see Ava perform at some point in the future. Make a comeback here. So, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that interview with Cody Garmon as much as we did. In this Sunset Clarity segment, I'd like to talk more about the many costumes we wear in our day-to-day lives. Keep in mind that when I say costumes, I'm not talking about that Halloween mask you might be pulling out later this month, and I'm not even referring to just clothing. Rather, we all make adjustments to the way we look, speak, and act in order to fulfill the many roles we take on in life. These are our costumes, the versions of ourselves that we slip into before diving into a certain environment or situation. During the day, we may wear our student or professional costume. At home, we take on the role of neighbor, sibling, partner, or parent. After another costume change, we may be ready for the role of wingmate, performer, or hot date. Often, we fit comfortably into these roles and float seamlessly through our many costume changes. However, it's also natural to outgrow a costume. They may become tight, uncomfortable, or even constricting. They may cease to help us along the path towards achieving our goals and reaching our fullest potential. Before slipping into your next costume, ask yourself whether it still serves you. Do you feel comfortable in this costume? Is it fulfilling its purpose? Does it accurately represent you? Or is it simply a reflection of what others have come to expect you to be? Some costumes serve us well for years, decades, and even a lifetime. But don't be afraid to tweak, update, or even reject a costume that's no longer right for you. Consider it another step along the path of becoming your most authentic self. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Don't forget to come on back now. I know we all love a little vibration, so if you are not already, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. And we will surprise you on occasion with a new release vibration in your pocket. But in the meantime, if you find yourself alone or crossing new horizons along the Rainbow Trail, and you need a friend or even a laugh to get you through those dark and stormy nights, holler on out to us at weatheringrainbows.com, where you can find shelter in the blogs, videos, and other episodes that will hopefully keep you out of a whole heap of trouble. So until next time, y'all, giddy up, be true to yourself, and make the best of life. And wherever the wild tracks may lead you, may the rainbow always touch your shoulder.